The raid. Imagine you're 7, playing outside your village home. Suddenly, raiders crash through your door. They ignore your family's valuables. Their target is you. In that instant, your life shatters. You'll never see your loved ones again. The Empire's shadow. For over 600 years, the Ottoman Empire dominated millions across 3 continents. We admire its grand mosques, mighty sultans, and military triumphs. But beneath the palace gold and imperial glory festered systematic horrors so brutal, contemporary witnesses could barely record them. This wasn't random cruelty or cultural gaps. These were state policies converting humans into trade goods, reducing women and girls to objects in a flesh market operating with ruthless, corporate precision. Uncovering the truth. What follows isn't conjecture. It's carved in Ottoman tax records, screamed in diplomats' journals, and etched in archaeological finds. This reveals how an empire weaponized its most defenseless. These weren't rare exceptions. They were foundational systems of imperial control that crushed generations of women. The true terror? Not just the atrocities, but their cold, legal organization. If exposing these buried truths matters to you, subscribe and drop your location below. Your support helps us unearth history's darkest legacies. The scale of enslavement. Consider the magnitude. In Constantinople, the empire's heart, enslaved people made up roughly 1% of the 16th to 17th century population. Now the shock. Nearly all were women and girls. Every elite household owned female slaves. Even ordinary families often had one. This wasn't some fringe operation. It was a vast, state-tolerated economy built on the systematic enslavement of women. The slave markets. The empire ran dedicated markets solely for selling female slaves. Istanbul's Avaret Pasalara, its female slave bazaar, operated openly from the 1400s until the early 1900s. Let that sink in. This wasn't some relic of the distant past. This market thrived while America fought its civil war and Europe industrialized, eras the world considers modern. Far from tolerating it, the Ottoman state actively regulated this trade. They taxed every sale and built complex legal systems governing human ownership. Officials kept meticulous records, purchases, prices, even racial classifications dictating a woman's worth. The bureaucracy of trafficking rivaled any other imperial department. Systematic procurement. The methods of acquisition exposed the horror's true scale. Women and girls were seized through military campaigns specifically designed for human capture. Targets spanned the Caucasus, Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, Central Europe, Southeast Europe, the Western Mediterranean, and Africa. But labeling them sources sanitizes the truth. These were coordinated raids on civilians where rape was a standard prelude to enslavement. During major conquests, the pattern held. Ottoman troops systematically assaulted women before taking them captive. Constantinople, a case study. The 1453 fall of Constantinople offers a grim window into this system. George Francis documented violations against both men and women inside Hagia Sophia itself. Monasteries became prime targets. Nuns were dragged to ships, assaulted by soldiers, then auctioned across the empire. This psychological terror was deliberate. Faced with their fate, some women chose death, throwing themselves into wells or taking their own lives. Most had no escape. Children were ripped from mothers. Young women were tortured to death, their bodies left on roadsides as warnings against resistance. Racial hierarchies and pricing. The empire built intricate racial hierarchies dictating a woman's fate and price. Officially, they denied racial distinctions among slaves. Reality? Starkly different. White women held the highest status and value. Next came Ethiopians, with fully black African women pushed to the bottom tier. This wasn't mere preference. It was a systematic classification controlling everything from living conditions to the specific exploitation endured. The pricing laid bare this calculated dehumanization. African girls bought for domestic or sexual labor typically sold for 1,500 to 2,500 kurush. White girls cost 3,000 kurush for domestic work, but soared above 6,000 kurush as concubines. Some even fetched 88,000 kurush, massive fortunes. These prices weren't random. They reflected cold market analysis, supply, demand, and the intended purpose of the purchase. Syrian girls with dark eyes and light brown skin sat in a middle tier, fetching up to 30 sterling. Nubian girls, deemed least desirable, sold for up to 20 sterling. The empire had crafted a detailed human catalogue based purely on perceived sexual and domestic utility. The merchants of flesh. The merchants fueling this trade operated within a ruthlessly efficient hierarchy. Those trafficking white slaves enjoyed higher social standing, joined elite guilds, and served wealthy clients. The system actively rewarded specialization in human trafficking. The more valuable the human commodity, the greater the prestige and profit. Legalized exploitation. The true horror began after purchase. Female slaves existed in a legal void. Sexual exploitation by their owner carried no legal punishment. A Muslim man had the legal right to have sex with any female slave he owned, though not with his wife's slaves. This created a perverse legal distinction, treating women as sexual property to be shared or withheld based on ownership. Children born from this rape were considered legitimate if the owner acknowledged them. This policy actively incentivized systematic rape, offering legal and social rewards to perpetrators. Women had zero control, not over their bodies, their pregnancies, or their children's fate. An owner's whim could transform them from a servant into a prostitute, rent them out for temporary sexual use, or force them to stand naked in slave markets for buyer inspection. Religious sanction. The legal framework enabling this horror was brutally deliberate. Religious scholars issued fatwas explicitly stating owners could kill their slaves without afterlife consequences under certain conditions. This wasn't abstract theology. It was practical permission for a society that normalized owning and discarding human lives. The Circassian example. The plight of Circassian women reveals how global crises fueled this machine. After Russia expelled Circassians starting in the 1850s, thousands seeking Ottoman refuge were enslaved instead. British observers noted white human flesh became unprecedentedly cheap. Women once worth 100 sterling now sold for just £5. These weren't accidental victims. They were targets of a system converting desperation into profit, transforming refugees into sexual commodities for Ottoman elites. A centuries-old machine for crushing human dignity, operating with bureaucratic precision. Behind the harem walls, screams echoed through marble halls. Young girls vanished behind locked doors. The empire called this civilization. Within Ottoman harems, nightmares wore luxury's mask. Behind jeweled walls and silk tapestries, thousands endured conditions that would shatter modern minds. Forget romantic fantasies of pampered concubines. Ottoman records and survivor accounts paint a darker truth. The imperial harem held 100 to 1000 plus women at any time. But the brutal reality? Most would never see the sultan. They were human furniture, maintaining a system designed to service imperial lust. Life in the harem. Conditions were deliberately harsh. Cramped, filthy rooms broke spirits, not comfort. Women faced life imprisonment, forbidden to leave, isolated from all men except their owner. A gilded cage. Inside, hierarchy ruled with iron fists. New arrivals, often girls of 6 or 7, were stripped of identities. New names, new religions, new purposes dictated by owners. The lucky ones, those deemed beautiful, endured specialized training, belly dancing, poetry, music, and what records coldly term erotic arts. But this was no education. It was systematic conditioning, molding traumatized children into polished instruments for male pleasure. Taught by older slave women who'd survived the same hell. Victims becoming accomplices. An endless cycle of broken lives. Psychological torture. Daily harem life weaponized psychological torment. Women lived in constant sexual readiness while battling hundreds of others for scraps of attention. The system engineered this competition, forcing elaborate performances to entertain masters while crushing any solidarity. It poisoned human connection. Sisters in suffering became survival rivals. They watched companions chosen for sexual use, knowing their turn would come. Some endured group encounters, forced to facilitate each other's exploitation behind masks of compliance. Those who failed to please or aged past usefulness faced fates worse than death, brothels, streets, or execution to clear space for younger girls. The empire discarded women who'd spent their youth servicing its lust. They were commodities with expiration dates stamped by male desire. Invisible scars. The trauma bled beyond harem walls. Freed women carried invisible wounds poisoning their remaining lives. Forming healthy bonds? Impossible. Trusting others? Unthinkable. Seeing worth beyond sexual utility? Destroyed. Many bore what we'd now call severe trauma disorders, hollowed out ghosts who survived by severing their own humanity. A dual legal system. Ottoman law crafted elaborate shields for free Muslim women, while drafting manuals for enslaving others. A free rape survivor could seek justice. An enslaved woman? Trapped in a legal void. No recourse. No protection. No hope. This duality wasn't accidental. It was designed to enforce hierarchy through sexual terror. Free women learned their safety depended on the system devouring enslaved sisters. Protection's price was complicity. Religious justification. The empire twisted faith to sanctify its savagery. Scholars penned treatises claiming enslaving infidel women was divine duty. Using their bodies was warriors' reward. Resisting constituted rebellion against God. This theology wasn't academic. It shaped millions of lives. Clerics blessed slave markets, sanctified rape, wrapped brutality in scripture. They built a moral hellscape where rape became righteousness and slavery masqueraded as salvation. The trade's machinery. This international slave trade operated with corporate efficiency. Ottoman merchants maintained catalogues detailing women by age, appearance, sexual history, and training. They offered warranties on virginity, fertility, and docility. Customer service included trial periods and returns. The logistics were staggering. Specialized slave ships crossed seas. Caravans traversed trafficking routes linking Africa, Eastern Europe, and the Caucasus to Ottoman markets. An entire infrastructure dedicated to commodifying female bodies. Documenting horror. Surviving records expose the trade's mechanics. Merchants tracked women like livestock, logging physical traits, sexual experience, languages, and skills. These documents still sit in Ottoman archives, irrefutable proof of centuries-long exploitation. Imperial expansion was partly fueled by demand for fresh human supplies. Commanders planned conquests calculating both territory and capturable women, factoring trafficking into military strategy. The routine of horror, the auction block, the screaming child, the mother's shattered weeping. These weren't rare tragedies. In the Ottoman Empire, destroying women's lives was as routine as tax collection or road maintenance. Tuesday mornings. The procurement system. Trafficking networks operated with precision surpassing modern cartels. Not random raiders. These were surgical procurement systems harvesting specific women for predetermined uses. Crimean Tatars perfected human hunting, annual harvest seasons timed with farming cycles when men worked distant fields. Raiders struck at dawn with military discipline, surrounding villages. Captives were systematically sorted by age and value. Premium, girls, 10 to 15 years, moldable for training. Immediate use, women, 20s, sexual reproductive value. Discarded, women, 30 plus, domestic drudgery or brothel death sentences. Journey to market. The journey itself was torture. Women marched chained in corfles across hundreds of miles. Those who collapsed were left to die. Resistors were beaten unconscious and dragged. Pregnant women who birthed en route watched their newborns killed, bodies abandoned, mothers forced onward with chains slicing infected wounds. Psychological breaking began immediately. Mothers torn from daughters, sisters separated. New names in foreign tongues replaced identities. Native languages forbidden. Grief punished. By market arrival, many were hollow shells, their trauma-induced numbness mistaken for docility by buyers. The market theater. Markets became theaters of dehumanization. Women stripped naked. Probed like livestock. Strangers clinically discussed their sexual potential. Teeth checked for age, breasts examined for fertility, reflexes tested for defects. Virginity verified publicly by officials. Intact hymens certified for premium pricing. The state taxed every transaction. Stall fees, inspections, transport permits, ownership transfers. Detailed registries tracked each woman's origin, price, and ownership history. Human trafficking wasn't just tolerated. It was a revenue stream meticulously documented across centuries. From person to property, the final erasure came after purchase. Bureaucracy transformed humans into sexual property with chilling efficiency. Owners receive certificates listing new acquisitions alongside furniture and livestock. Each entry detailed physical attributes, sexual history, and intended use, a woman reduced to an inventory line item. The enduring echo. The Ottoman Empire fell in 1922, but its legacy of industrialized exploitation echoes still. These weren't distant barbarities. They were state policies shaping continents and millions of lives. The archives remain. The evidence survives. The stories scream to be heard. They remind us, beneath civilization's gilded surface often lurk humanity's deepest failures.